Welcome into the D2 Baseball Podcast. We're joined today by Rick Odette, head coach at Florida Southern. And, well, the Mocs are doing really well right now. They've jumped into the top 5 in our rankings. They just took a series against then number 1 Tampa this past weekend. And then they go to St. Leo this weekend. So we'll talk all about that. But first, we're going to welcome Rick Odette to the program. Coach, thanks for taking the time to join us. Your team is really playing at a high level, 25-7. After you inherit a team that wins 18 ball games last year, you've really, in year one, just made this program turn into a national contender. How have you done it?
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I don't know if that's probably not a real answer, and obviously we've got a lot left here to go. But it's one thing that I'm really fortunate with Tony Caldwell, Mitch Widetic, and Jalen Guy. Our staff came in, and we were all, and Alex Freypart as well. 3 of the 4 of us were together at St. Leo. So when we came over, we were really familiar on what we were trying to do, what we were looking to accomplish. So that was key. I think that's number one. I think anytime you can have stability within your staff, so you're not learning each other on the go, that was a big piece. And obviously, they had some pieces here that were really good. We had to add some quickly, and we brought some guys in to help us immediately. And to their credit, the guys have done a really, really good job of playing hard. We've got plenty to go. We've got plenty to get better at, but we do like where we're at right now.
And, Coach, I want to go into that Tampa series. Now, obviously, Tampa's a perennial powerhouse at your time with St. Leo, but now you step with Florida Southern, first year with Florida Southern, and there's a little bit of a different feel, especially with the historic that both of these programs have put on. What was that kind of like from your perspective in your first year with Florida Southern?
Well, I think for the guys that were returning, again, Tampa's done a really, really good job for a long time, and Joe does a fantastic job, as good as anybody. I think the biggest thing with us is showing that we can compete with them, right? Like there comes in this aura of, they're used to winning and used to winning at a high level, that we can compete. And so once we started to do that, and you can kind of see it after that first night, is why not? Now we feel like we're in this conversation rather than hoping to be in it. So we felt pretty good, once we went in. The thing is here is Florida Southern's been a place that's used to championships, and but we got to get our guys to buy in, to who we're playing every night, not just Tampa. And once we do that, let's see where it goes.
The stolen base numbers are just off the charts this season, and I just wonder, where does that mindset? I know, like at St. Leo, your teams would run a lot too, but I mean, 143 swiped bags through 32 games. How do you go about teaching base running? Is it in recruiting? Is it in the development? Is it just the mindset of the type of guys you want in your lineup? Because you're doing it at such a high clip as well. Of course, you're aggressive, but you're stealing with so much success right now, the second best mark in the country. Tell us about what goes into that.
Yeah, I mean, first, and obviously you have to have good enough players. You have to have guys who are dynamic, that can steal a base, and not only be fast enough, but actually can understand how to steal. And again, it goes back to the credit I just told you with our staff is Tony Caldwell's. We're not just stuck into hitting doubles and homers. We can move guys, we can run guys. We don't have to just go station to station with bunt only. And there's a lot of time. Every day is spent a portion of practice on base running, and he hammers it through those guys of what we're looking to do. And when we succeed or why we don't, that's taught every day as well. So we're never going to take it for granted, but it's also part of our makeup. We want to be dynamic. We want to make sure that if we've got a good arm, we can put pressure on them. And it's helped our offense tremendously. And then obviously when you're scoring runs, it helps your pitching staff. And we've been fortunate to be able to field behind it with Coach Widetic and his crew. So, it's just like anything, guys. You know how it is. You got to get buy-in to the guys. Obviously our staff and what they do says enough for itself, but once it all works together, it really makes it pretty exciting.
And Coach, I want to ask about, the concept of, midweeks. You just recently played your last midweek against Nova Southeastern, and now you're just into weekend series in Sunshine State Conference play. How do you plan to maybe get opportunities or keep guys loose for those guys who typically throw in midweeks, or just getting opportunities for guys who maybe get more opportunities during the midweek?
Yeah, I think we've used 16, 17 arms, as a whole. I will say we're still trying to figure out what that's going to look like. I think when you get down the stretch, you need that 8 to 10 to feel comfortable as you keep moving along. We're trying to figure exactly who those guys are and what roles they might have. We might have a couple more that we use, once we get there. For us, you've got to throw strikes. You got to get ahead. You got to be able to hold runners, and you got to be able to compete and command. And if you can't, it's really hard to run a guy and be dependable and rely on that guy if they can't do that. So, we've been always fortunate to be able to pump the zone and fill it up. We need to do a better job. We're getting better at it. But I think that's the key, is if you can get guys you can rely on, you can rotate those pitchers. The problem is if you get in a close game and you have somebody in the bullpen that doesn't have command and is not going to throw enough strikes, that's a hard guy to go to. So the more confidence that they show us, the more opportunity we're able to spread around. But, otherwise we're going to have to stay with that 8 to 10. But hopefully we can use others and take some workload off of some of those guys.
Speaking of pitching, there's a guy grew up in California, went to Michigan, now at Florida Southern, and he's looking like one of the best arms in the league right now. 6-1 through 9 starts, a pair of complete games. What's the story behind finding Ramos to come to this program and just seeing him compete and be in the zone so often? What's his makeup? What's his work ethic like? And what can you share about when we look at it from the outside, one of the most successful pitchers in the country right now?
Well, last year we talked about Lashuka when he had 38 scoreless innings. And then as soon as we talked about it, I think in 3 pitches he gave that up. So I'm not going to talk too much or too highly of him because I am somewhat superstitious. But no, Satcham is a guy that was a two-way guy at Michigan and wanted to do the same thing when he came here. My relationship with Tracy Smith at Michigan, when they figured out maybe it was going to go in a different direction, was able to get us in contact. And been a great guy for us and a resource for us. And Satcham's come in, and he's probably as athletic as anybody on our team. He's done a really good job for us and really could play another position. But it's hard when you have your Friday guy. How do you fill him into those roles as a position guy and obviously still keep him healthy and fresh? But no, he does a good job. Super athletic, holds runners, gives us a chance, and really competes at every level. I'm not jinxing
Coach. No, that's perfectly understandable, Coach. Kind of a bridge question before we talk, more in depth about St. Leo. You did this earlier with Eckerd with the midweek, and you play them on the weekend, and then you played St. Leo in a midweek, and now you play them on the weekend. How does that help you prepare for a weekend series, knowing that you've already played them in a midweek set?
Yeah, geographically, it's kind of what we have, right? Like a lot of teams do the same thing. So we have so many, most of our teams in Florida, outside of Flagler in West Florida, which is quite a bit of distance from us, are in our league. So, you'll have your Valdasas will come in. We're not able to get them on the schedule this year, but hopefully next year. But then you have your northern teams on spring trips. So you kind of have to play those local teams in extra time. I wouldn't say I overly like it, just because you do use some guys that maybe you'd rather not on a weekend of a conference series compared to what the midweek would look like. But it's kind of just geographically what we have to do. And we know that if we're playing a team in our league, we better be ready to play on Tuesday, because you're going to get beat. So I do think it keeps you moving. It keeps you alert rather than somebody coming in that you're not going to be motivated to beat as much. I think your team kind of loses focus, and teams like that obviously make you stay on your toes.
Well, as we do reflect on the series that we had this past weekend with St. Leo, or coming up this weekend with St. Leo, and about what you did against Tampa, I know now you start to look ahead and going into that series. I know What are those feelings like for you? Because you spent 7 seasons as the head coach there. And I know it's not just you, right? You talk about the staff that came over, the guy leading your team in hitting right now, who was a first team all conference player at St. Leo last year. What is the feeling like heading into this weekend series? I know it's another Sunshine State conference battle and it's going to be a tough one, but going to St. Leo, what emotions are right there for you coming up for this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, St. Leo was a great place for us. We loved it. You know, it was a great spot for us. You know, for our whole staff and Mikey as well, and all of us left with great feelings. You know, towards the place. You know, but as you guys know, as competitors, you want to win every game. You know, and that's the thing, is trying to compartmentalize exactly where your emotion piece is, and then obviously staying to the task of trying to figure out how to be one run better each time. And it's hard. There's no doubt about it. They're gonna honor one of one of the alumni from St. Leo, a guy named Pete Biscardi, on Friday night. So they're gonna bring even more to the table, which is a great honor for him and a well-deserved one. But from the same end of it, our job is to go in there and handle our business, and then afterwards, you know, really reflect on what a great place it was, especially for the time that we were there. And then let's see what happens the rest of the way. But yeah, it's super difficult. It'd be easier to tell you, you know, we don't care, it doesn't matter. But you know, it'd be hard to tell you that too.
And Coach, you know, within that, you know, kind of going forward into that schedule, beyond, you know, you play St. Leo starting Friday, and then Palm Beach Atlantic Friday, but then 3 of your last 4 remaining series start on Thursday. You know, how does that kind of adjustment create for you in terms of, you know, planning out maybe a pitching schedule or playing a day early?
It does factor in. It's, you know, it's something that, you know, it's just the way graduation is here. You know, and the factor, you know, if it's either our graduation, somebody else's graduation, it does factor. I'd be lying to you to say it doesn't. It does factor in. You know, we're going to kind of play it by ear, because this will be the first time we do that first weekend in a couple weeks, that we do it. Obviously, keeping our rotation would be great with one less day, but if we need to move something around because of it to keep, you know, maybe one guy fresh, or needs that extra day, then we're going to have to adjust. But that's going to kind of be let's see how it goes type of conversation, and how he feels and how our other guys feel as we move along.
Based on your coaching experience, and I know longtime St. Joe, St. Leo, as we've detailed, and now Florida Southern, as the landscape of Division II baseball is changing, and just college athletics in general, are you also changing with that, with the way you want to build your program, like looking at some of your top arms and bats? And obviously the change is the transfer portal. It's a huge thing. And I know certainly when you come in and be so competitive in your first season, it's hard to build it any other way. I just wonder, in this current age of college athletics, what are your thoughts on how you want to ultimately build a sustained success at a program? Do you want to do it through the portal, through high school, or is it just, hey, it depends on the year?
That's a great question. I think we're all trying to figure it out, right? Like the last 5 years has flipped things so differently. 20 years ago, if a guy was a transfer, you really were hesitant on taking that guy. What was he? An academic problem, a social problem, a team issue, whatever it might be. Now it's a numbers issue, and it's not even the kid's fault sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. So now you've got to adjust. It's also, Division II is really old right now. You know, and part of that is the rules, and COVID's about, you know, that is finally, I think, going to run its course. But it's really difficult, you know, to do what we did at St. Joe, where we rarely had transfers. For scholarship conversations, we just didn't have the financing to do it. But also, it wasn't something we believed in. We wanted homegrown guys that loved the place from start to finish, got their degree there, kept coming back with their family, and so on. Now the game has changed. And if you don't change, it's going to change without you. So for us, we've made an adjustment. We've kind of hammered we've hit the transfer portal hard, but we have also found the right pieces of people. And I say that is huge. I don't care how good the player is. If he's not the right person for your program, you're coaching the wrong way. Because if you take talent over character, not that they don't always go perfect, but if you take talent over character, sooner or later, when you do stumble, it's going to be really hard to come out of it because you don't have the right people in the clubhouse. So for us, we want to make sure not only are they a good player, and I know this sounds super politically correct, but that they're the right fit for who we want and what we want and what type of player and person they are, right? Like, can they handle tough coaching? Are they willing to come out and work and practice the way we do every day? We're not a throw the baseballs on the field and go. We're the opposite. Like every day, like today, pregame BP usually is just that. For us, we'll run through 10 minutes or 20, 25 minutes of team, 5-minute segments, because we're going to make sure we're tuned up and we're ready to go. Where a lot of times it's just kind of show and go, get out of there, and that's it. Like every place has a certain way they do it. I'm not saying ours is the right way, but you have to find the right people that can work within the way you coach and the way our coaching staff does it. So yeah, it's hard, man. It's a really difficult find. Will is how do you figure out what fits for you? To figure out we have the right formula yet, I don't know that, because I think the game is still changing. I think the way the transfer stuff is changing. You're seeing it now. NIL is going to be in the mix and all this other stuff. And are we going to be in that conference? We don't know that stuff, So this is all new to us. But again, if we don't evolve, it's going to evolve without us, and then we're going to be, not very happy in the long run.
And Coach, reflecting on your head coaching career, on Friday night, you got win number 700 against Tampa. Have you reflected on that at all? Or have you kind of thought about, man, this journey that I've been on and will continue to be on?
I wouldn't say that I necessarily reflected on that. I will say this. I do appreciate it. And the reason I appreciate it is the number of texts, calls. I mean, literally had, and I don't say this braggingly, but over 100 texts in 2 days. And it's people that played for us, that were a huge part of it, or the coach for us, or whatever. Like any head coach that thinks you win games without other people or good players, you're crazy. That's not how it works. And it wasn't about me. It's about how cool it was to talk to those guys again, or text, and guys that you love to talk to more, but you just can't. Everybody's life gets fast. But that's probably the reflection piece is, man, it's like, you're a huge part of this too. It wasn't just I showed up there and we won games. It was far from that. It's probably the least. I probably had the least to do with it. Let's be honest. Like, they're the ones that play, and then our assistants are the ones that help tune it up. So, it was a cool honor. There's no doubt. I think when you get old, sooner or later you run into those type of things. But we've been really fortunate to have the right people to do it with.
And with coaching, I know just in-game management, I'd love your thoughts on this, but I believe just from an outsider's perspective and being in dugouts, one of the hardest things to do as a coach is manage a bullpen. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, but off of that note, I know that you've used a couple different guys in the back end of your pen this year. Is that something throughout seasons that you just have to figure out who's going to rise to the occasion at that current moment? Because the save at the back end that Casey Odell had this past weekend, he looks like a guy that could be a back end type of guy for you. What are your thoughts overall about kind of developing your back end and who's going to be the guy? And then, hey, if they have a bad outing, we still got to trust him. He's our guy. That seems like a tough thing to do because it's a one-inning shot and you either win or you lose based off that decision.
It is. I mean, it's super difficult, right? Like, we don't have any history here yet, right? So I don't have a guy that was a sophomore that's a senior now. Like every guy is just into this at 30-something games. So, you're trying to get it. And the other thing is when you're playing in our league and in our region, the series means the most. So you can't just run a guy like the big leagues. Like, he could have a bad month and have a great year. Like, we don't have such a thing. We don't have that. You have a bad month, you're going to have a bad team month, So especially in that position where, the last 3 outs mean a lot. I've been fortunate to have really good closers over my time, and try the ideal situation is having the setup guy to the closer, or the 7th-inning guy to set up to the closer. Right now, we're trying to figure out what that looks like. We have some guys that are in conversation, but to be honest with you, we're kind of figuring out, okay, what's the matchup look like? This guy is a dead red fastball guy. Okay, we have this guy. This guy is a guy that we've got to have some velo. I can't go to him. I got to go to this guy. So kind of mix and match. And then, the other thing is you got to be able to hold runners, because that's going to matter late in the game, and you got to be able to pick the baseball up. If you can't do that, it doesn't really matter who's on the mound. But you also can't get free passes up. So, if you get that tie and run on base because of a walk, you've self-inflicted some trouble, and we try to avoid that the best we can, of course.
And Coach, the final question I have for you, especially speaking of, how good this region is overall, and, the remaining schedule without a conference tournament, talk to me, or tell a little bit about the impact of just playing out the rest of the schedule, one, and hopefully being in a position where, especially winning on the road is hard, being in a position where you have potentially that opportunity to host at historic Henry Field.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be ready every weekend. You know what I mean? That's the thing. You've got to win on the road. You've got, of course, if we can for one, let's get to a regional. But that means we got to win this weekend, and we got to worry about the next game and worry about all that type of stuff. I think when you start looking at what ifs, I think you're setting yourself up to fail, because no matter what our start looks like, you want to finish the right way as you get in the postseason. So until we can get there and figure out what it looks like next, we just need to worry about what's in front of us. I mean, and again, that's coach talk, right? It sounds great, but it's true. If we had an opportunity to play at a place like this, it would be unbelievable. The atmosphere, the crowds were unbelievable this weekend, and I anticipate the rest of the way out will be the same. It's super exciting atmosphere. It's a really cool place. But the excitement, I think, just in general in our league, you go to a place, home field makes a difference because there's a crowd there. It's not just some girlfriends in your family. You know what I mean? Like, it's a real environment now. And I'm not saying there's 5,000 people in the crowd, but there's people that care if you win or lose. So it's a fun atmosphere. It's, you're going to be challenged every weekend, no matter if they're in the top of the league or the bottom of the league. You better be ready to play, or you're going to be disappointed. So, yeah, no, it would be an awesome experience if we get to that point. But right now we're going to worry about St. Leo, and that's going to be plenty for us.
Final question for me, Coach. You mentioned the back end and how there was a lot of, new pieces involved. And that's kind of, a theme for your entire squad. But one guy who is at least familiar with this program at the hot corners developed a reputation for having a great glove. And I know you've seen him from playing in this conference over the years in Roshan Riley, but he's hitting at an incredible clip to begin conference play, 442 in conference play. And the reason I bring him up, obviously a staple at the hot corner right now, but he's a guy who had been here. And so I just wonder, is he one of those guys on this team that is one of those leaders as you try to establish your culture and get buy-in from everybody? Is he someone that's at the forefront of that with his familiarity and just track record being an all-conference player?
Yeah, I mean, but Sean and Jevin Relaford, our shortstop, are both guys that were here, and both pieces we wanted to make sure we secured when we got the job. I mean, two of the biggest. And I'll tell you this: for them to be in a situation like this is pretty awesome. And when I say this is a true conversation, and sometimes it even scares you as a coach. But these are the best group of guys. When I say this, like, we've had great guys that I've coached. I've been super fortunate, but the nicest group of guys I've ever had, nicest, whatever you take that to be, right? The nicest group of guys. And Sean fits into that mold, but he also is a leader. He's not afraid to tell you when it's not right. He's not afraid to make sure that he pushes you when he needs to push you. But he also was a guy that loved the place to come back enough, knew that last year wasn't how he wanted to finish it, and then pushed the other guys to realize, hey, man, we don't have to be, struggling. We can actually win, and I can be a big piece of that, and I'm going to make Jevin do the same thing, and he has. Both of those guys together on the left side of the field, you feel really good about. And I think if your left side of the field's good, you've got a chance. And then Mikey Scott's in left field. And like that's a really good triangle right there, right? Between the three. But also, and most importantly, is the leadership of them, of what they say, what they do, how they act. You know, somebody needs to be, adjusted, talked to. It doesn't have to just come from the coach. Those guys are not afraid. And we've got a number of those guys right now that when something happens, they're the first ones to stop it. And I think when you're in that conversation as a coach, you feel pretty good about it.
Well, Coach, we sincerely appreciate you taking the time out to talk with us, talk about the Florida Southern program, and wish you the best of luck going forward the rest of the season, and best of luck this weekend at St. Leo.
Well, guys, I appreciate you, and I know I've said this before, but what you guys are doing for D2 baseball, and I truly mean this, you're putting us on the map, and we really appreciate everything you guys do.
And that is head coach Rick Odette at Florida Southern.